everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
What have you got on your head now, Dee?
Oh, darling, my newest creation, because I just thought, it's a summery sort of wonderful day. We're covering a very important subject today, which is the Windrush anniversary, which was on the 22nd. And it's the lovely, lovely Angie Greaves who's going to talk about Windrush and her association with it. So come in, Angie.
Hey. Angie. Hi, beautiful girl.
How are you all?
You look stunning, darling, as always. Darling, we're going to be talking about a very, very important subject today. But before we do, can I talk to you about something perhaps less important, but very exciting, which is the new Sex and the City. And I know that you visited Carrie's flat.
I am a Sex in the City fanatic. I've always loved it. It was a bit of a shock factor when it first came out because we'd never seen anything like it. And I think people focused more on the sex as opposed to women of a certain age owning their beauty, owning their independence, owning their careers. And even if being in a relationship, owning the fact that you can still have a level of independence and your career. And so I kind of eased into Sex and the City. I think once the first film came out and I got the box set and I watched them all again, I got it. What I love about the new season and Just Like That is they're all in their mid-50s and they've refused to accept the stereotype once you hit a certain age, beauty, glamour, sexiness, self-care goes out of the window. That's what I really love about this current series. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
In real life, Angie, I think I've gone the other way. I take much more care and much more glamorous than I was when I was younger.
But I think that could be said for most of us because the attention in the media comes off of us. We then feel, okay, well, hold on, just because this brand says or that trend doesn't include us, do I have to feel that way? No, let me embrace all facets of beauty and feeling sexy and feeling good. I mean, look, I don't know that I've had the same hairstyle for any of these Wonderbirds things because I don't see why when you reach a certain age, you shouldn't look after your skin, you shouldn't look after your body, you shouldn't get, I don't get it. I totally understand where you're coming from, Debbie, because by mistake, I don't know if this is the right way of putting it, December, I was diagnosed pre-diabetic and I just made up my mind that I was not going to allow diabetes to be a part of my life. So I took part in a detox, 75 days, no sugar, no salt, no dairy, no alcohol, no carbs, lost 2 stone 4. I feel fantastic. So I've got a new reason of life.
You look amazing.
Because we all met up for dinner when you had just come to the end of it and you were feeling absolutely wonderful and drinking a lot of water.
That's right.
And you also drank some wine. I think it was your celebration.
Yeah, we met at Joe Allen's and I felt fantastic. And one of the things I do like about the whole Sex and the City thing is this, whether they bring it across as a refusal to acknowledge what the stereotype says, because they're just putting it out there, people are embracing it. So Piccadilly in London, there's like a pop-up of Carrie's flat. And it's amazing. So you can go in the bedroom, you can go in her wardrobe, you can go in her study. There's you can sit on the steps of her apartment. She's got a brownstone in New York. You can even go to a bar and have a cosmopolitan. But what was really interesting was there were women there and men of all ages and all cultures. And it was brilliant. I loved it. I loved it.
Did you see her shoes?
No, I didn't see her shoes, but I'm going to put on my Insta story a lady who had bought, do you remember Carrie used to wear a white, like a net skirt?
Yes.
Right, at the beginning of each episode. So there was a lady there in a black net skirt, but she had the Malono Blahnik shoes, the blue ones that Carrie wore for her wedding. So I'm going to put it on my Insta story.
Amazing, amazing.
It's
the new series I've been watching, actually, it's interesting, isn't it? They have gone very politically correct, but it's really fascinating how they've sort of grown and developed.
I love the fact that they now are including, and Caddy, you will probably embrace this, they're including Black women, they're including Black men.
Yes.
I mean, look, you go to New York, it's a multicultural city. So I was a little bit more, why wait till now? But better late than never.
Yes.
And they've got the non-binary. I've always loved Alfie. So I do like that they are now embracing that. And like I said, better late than never. Yeah. Yeah,
because that was the only thing that used to worry me before, that it wasn't very inclusive. But it wasn't but as you say, they've realized now that it's really important, to be inclusive, as we all know.
Absolutely. I mean, even from a cultural perspective, like I say, whether you go to New York, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the different cultures, that's why I love New York. Yeah,
absolutely. And London too.
Absolutely, yeah,
it's brilliant. Well, we celebrated a very, very special anniversary, didn't we, on the 22nd?
Yeah, Thursday.
Yeah, the Windrush.
Yeah. It's an important part of British culture. I don't know whose email just went off, but anyway, it's an important part of our culture, because when you think about that first ship that came in 1948, that was the start of what I believe made Britain great. So you would have had Caribbeans that poured their heart and soul into London Transport and the NHS. That's just two organisations. But when you think about even food, music, I mean, Notting Hill Carnival, the cultures that have come together and are now inclusive in British lifestyle, I think it's amazing. I really do.
I think too. And they had so much prejudice, though, didn't they, when they arrived? And it was so hard.
My dad used to tell me about an encounter he had with some teddy boys who just didn't want him in the pub, in the clubs. It was in the churches. If you think about why the Black churches were, so strong now, because they had to create their own churches because they weren't welcomed. But even if you just take music, so about 2-3 weeks ago, there was a Windrush celebration. Trevor Nelson was hosting it. Beverly Knight was there, and Yolanda Brown, and there was also, oh my gosh, Craig David. But before they all started their performances, Craig talked about his dad coming from Grenada. Beverly talked about her parents coming from Jamaica. And it's about the richness that their parents passed down to them that they now give to current UK lifestyle.
Yeah. Very important, very important. Caddy has got you're talking about your husband.
Yes, because my husband's family, his parents came from Antigua. And like you said, they had to create their own associations, and there was a big Antigua association that's still going in London. But it's fascinating hearing about their stories of coming. And of course, so many negative stories. So, for example, my husband's parents, when he was a child, they went to view a house. They had an appointment with an estate agent to buy a house, and the owners wouldn't let them over the doorstep and pretended the house had already been sold. And
oh God, that's awful.
my uncle arriving, they were spat upon as they walked onto the shore. And there are all these negative stories, but it's so wonderful that we've got this anniversary where we are celebrating the arrival. And I think that's important, because
it is. It's very important, Caddy. My dad drove a London bus, but refused to drive it for very long. And it's not that he felt he was above, but to leave his home to become one of many, and that's not a criticism, he just felt, if I'm going to leave my home, and not just the weather, but, you know, our parents lived off the land. They had a very dynamic way of living in the Caribbean. And my dad went to college and he learned engineering, and he joined a company called Metal Box, and he became a foreman. So in the 70s, to be in management and Black, you can imagine his team used to call him Darky. And he would want to express how he really felt about being called Darky, but in order to keep his job, he rose above it. Some might say, oh, you sold out, but in rising above it, he obtained strength that he passed to me. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, that this generation, young generation now understands that, because the silence that people had to keep, and people were not allowed to say, in order to keep their jobs and keep their status and just get anywhere. I think it can't be underestimated.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, it's survival, isn't it?
Yes.
It was just, they had to survive. And I think, you know, they had a vision of what it was going to be like, and that it was the promised land. And when they arrived, it was far from it.
I know, and it wasn't just the weather.
Exactly.
Angie, can you tell me why it happened? Why Windrush actually happened? Can you tell our viewers what was the actual thing in 1948 that brought everybody over here?
There was a time where, after I think it was World War II, Britain needed to be built up, and additional labour, to put it mildly, was required. So opportunities were given to a lot of people in the Caribbean islands to come for, I think it was 5 years, was it, Caddy? They said initially, come for 5 years, and you can make more money than you can make doing agriculture, which was probably the main source of Caribbean lifestyle, because sugar would have been the main export of in the Caribbean islands. So, you know, you're offered this 5-year opportunity, but 5 years becomes 10, and then you meet someone. If you've not come with your partner, then children come along. Right, we've got to get our kids into school before we take them out and go back, and then before you know it, your kids are now in college and they're now working. So what happened, and I can say this categorically for my mum, she ended up spending more time here in the UK than in Barbados. So when we go to Barbados now, I can take my mum to more places than she's ever known in Barbados. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, well, I don't remember. I mean, I remember going to where my mum's old school was. It's not there anymore. So, you know, it's something that I think historically was going to happen. It just so has happened in our lifetime. So we can talk about it.
There were so many families that were split up, weren't they? That, I mean, some people would go back and then they wouldn't be allowed back in because they didn't have a British passport, or were told that they weren't able to get back in. Terrible.
There are stories, Caddy, you may even be able to assist me on this one. There are stories of people who, after having been here 25, 30, 40 years, realised that they didn't have a British passport. So even though they had the papers to come here and work, even though they had work and paid into the system for how many ever years, they didn't have passports, so effectively weren't British citizens. So
And they also said, but I think it was because they came with their parents, and a lot of the kids were on their parents' passports.
Yeah, I used to be on my mum's passport.
And they just assumed
I was as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that was awful. And Suella, is it Suella? Last week, was, she wouldn't apologise because the interviewer said, "Do you want to apologise for the the terrible sort of mishap?" And she sort of diverted that question and would not apologise, and that made me very, very angry because I felt.
Let's go political another day.
Yeah. But one of my best friends' parents came over on Windrush, and both of them worked for British Rail. And they just when I speak to his mum, she always says to me, "Oh, Great Britain was fantastic. It really, I can't knock it at all. But because they had to, as I said, they had to survive. But my friend always says, yeah, but they had a terrible time. They had to really, turn a blind eye to all the prejudice and just get their heads down and work. And that's
it's ignorance. I think so much of it was ignorance. But of course, my mum was a refugee. She came over on the kinder transport. So, when she was 4 by herself. And again, when she found out she was Jewish, she was, screamed at and spat at. And so it's the ignorance of, people in Britain at the time for everything like that. I mean, I was thinking when my mum came over, she came over in 1939 when she was 4. Can you imagine that by herself? And this was only just a few years later. So, they had an influx of Jewish people coming, that they had an influx of Black people coming. And I think they just thought, oh my God, we're going to get overrun. No one gave them the knowledge about why people were coming here. And I think there's a massive difference between what happened with Windrush, because they came over here to work. Now that the immigrants, there's a huge difference. I keep saying this, between immigrants and refugees or workers. I mean, Windrush were none of those things. They actually were coming over here for a reason, and they were asked to come.
Yeah. And left homes to live in rooms. That was difficult. And my mum tells me about, she had her first room with my dad in West London, Ravington Road, off of the Harrow Road. And they had to go once a week to Loftus Road to have a bath.
My God.
There were families and different families and friends and extended families all living squashed together. And that was life. But I think that people are coming for themselves, but also they were coming for the UK. When you think about the NHS was established, was it 1947, 1948? Yeah. It could not have got off the ground without those workers.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Caddy, because without the influx of Caribbeans, the NHS wouldn't be what it is today. They couldn't hold up the demand of medical care that was required. And a lot of the Caribbean women specifically, if you think, they probably, a large percentage of them came from domestic backgrounds or were so young they weren't even working, to go straight into the medical field. And a lot of these women worked their way up to state registered nurses and sisters, and they have backbone, and we owe it to them. We owe it to them. We really do.
Huge loss of status, because my husband's mother was a teacher in Antigua, which was which was status.
Oh, absolutely. She was up there, yeah.
Yes. And then the same with his dad, who ended up being a conductor on the buses, and he was an incredible mathematician. But it's those kinds of things as well. They weren't recognized for their talent, but just
I think in being asked to come somewhere and in agreeing to leave behind, the expectation is, and I hate saying this, but I hope you understand when I say this, you leave where you are in Antigua and you will come to a lower status. That in itself must have been very frustrating. Can you imagine what that did to the marriages? Can you imagine, do you know what I mean? What that did to friendships, what that did, just to know. For instance, my mother's parents were quite wealthy. My grandfather was the first man in his village to have a car and the first man in his village to have a radio. So people used to congregate in his front garden to listen to boxing matches and listen to the news. And then my mum came here. Her first job was cleaning at Queen Charlotte's Hospital. And she tells myself and my daughters the story all the time. She said, I had to stop doing it because if somebody had gone back to Barbados and said, I saw Marjorie on her hands and knees cleaning. So there was a lot of struggle. Do you know what I mean? Emotional struggle.
I suppose it wasn't sold that way. You know, when you're told you're going to go to a different country, you're going to help build it up, you feel that everybody will be on the same level as you. Well, I would have thought that anyway. And then to become, and that isn't the case. It must be very hard.
No.
But England must have seemed so grey, and, you know, especially after the war as well, to come from all that colour and all that vibrant music.
My parents hadn't seen snow till they were in their 30s.
Wow.
Angie,
Let's leave that there.
As usual, you've been the most fantastic person on the show. We do love you. Actually, we must all meet soon.
I love being
We
here.
are. Yes.
Let's do another evening.
Yeah.
Love, ladies.
Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
Thank you for explaining.
Take care.
Bye,
And
darling.
we'll see you
Bye.
soon, darling.
Okay.
I'll catch up with Sex
Bye.
and the
Bye.
City. Bye. Oh,
wonderful.
Well,
isn't that fabulous?
Well, that
That's
explains a lot of things, doesn't it? I mean, how do you feel about it all, Caddy?
Oh, this is such an important anniversary, and I think particularly my children's family, because of course Stuart's family come from Antigua. It's so important to them, and it feels like a celebration, which usually these histories don't feel like a celebration. There's always so much talk about the issues and all of that. So it's so nice to actually talk about it positively.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so glad we talked about it, because to me it's really, really important. I've got a bit of sad news, and we all know about it, but for our viewers, we had somebody called Lena working with us since the outset of Wonderbirds, and in fact she really helped us set it all up. And you know, behind the scenes, we don't really talk about people behind the scenes, but she was a really important part of the sort of development and the story. And she sadly passed away very, very suddenly last week. I spoke to her most days. She did a lot of the research on the show, etc. And she just told me she wasn't feeling very well. And what had happened, and I think this is probably something that we should all be very aware of at any age. She actually was wearing flip-flops and she fell over and she had a hairline fracture, I think, on her hip, which got infected unbeknownst to her, and it turned to sepsis very quickly. And she died within 24 hours. And I spoke to her a week ago and she said, I'm not feeling too great. And that was it. And I think sepsis, you know, is the silent killer. But we'd like to do a special tribute to Lena and to say thank you to her for all her amazing work and for being a friend of mine for 30 years. Thank you.
Wow. All we can say is that, because I didn't know her personally and the girls didn't know her either, but we are grateful, because without her, Wonderbirds, you know, I mean, we are one thing, but Lena was literally, you know, like, if you like, the power behind the throne. and got us our first answer and everything. And so what we want to say is we'll see you on the other side, Lena. I hope there is a way that you can see this, and you're probably watching us now anyway, thinking, oh, good, I'm glad you've done this. But
yeah, exactly. About time.
We'll see. Lena, darling, thank you for everything, and we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you, Lena.